The ocean is massive and is one place we know very little about. There are so many terrifying things that go on down there. Coming in at number 5 we have the narwhal tusk. If any of you have ever seen the movie Elf, then you're familiar with the cute narwhal in the beginning of the movie, and that movie really brought narwhals to the public's attention and making this sea creature more popular than ever before, but so much about this creature is a mystery. In 1577 the English explorer Martin Frobisher led an expedition of 150 men to the northern Canada in search of gold, but they had come across something they had never intended, and that was the sea unicorn. The myth of the unicorn goes back centuries, and the business of unicorn horn trade was sustained through the Middle Ages and Renaissance by Vikings who killed the so-called sea unicorns, cut off their horns and sold them for an astronomical price. As European naturalists became more familiar with the world's animal, the myth of the unicorn faded, but mystery of the sea unicorn continued. Frobisher's discovery was actually what we know today as the narwhal, but the horn itself continues to be speculated by many. But the horn is apparently not a horn at all, but is a tooth. The relatives of narwhals include species like the beluga whales, orcas and dolphins, but the mystery remains of how did this massive freakish tooth evolve in this one specific species, after its ancestors branched off from whales with ordinary teeth. Many scientists and researchers debate about what this tooth is used for, and some suggest it's an acoustic probe, a rudder, an ice picker, or a spear for battling predators. These creatures don't make it easy for researchers to see them use their tusk for anything at all, so it makes many people continue to question it. Many have come up with many different theories about this so-called horn and what they use it for and why they have it. It has created a huge debate between researchers and scientists to this day, but no definite answer has come out to this day. In at number 4 we have the submarine disappearances in 1968. This is one giant mysterious situation, which is the disappearance of 4 submarines from 4 different countries in 1968. The USS Scorpion, a Soviet submarine K-129, a French submarine Minerve, and the INS Dakar went inexplicably missing over just a 5-month period, and the last 2 disappearing only 4 days apart. The exact causes of these sinkings remain unknown and remain a mystery over 50 years later. The INS Dakar was scheduled to arrive in Israel on January 29, 1968. When it didn't return, searchers went out to find it, but after a while there was no sign of the missing submarine. So the search ended on February 4th, and the 69-man crew was officially declared dead in 1981. The cause of the sinking was never determined, and theories say that either a mechanical or human error caused a catastrophic accident, or that the submarine snorkel was damaged after hitting another ship, causing it to flood. The Minerve was on the training operation in the Mediterranean on January 27, 1968, and when they were on their way home, the men were caught in a bad storm. When it was 30 miles away from the port, the Minerve made contact with the men on land and said it would port in about an hour, but an hour came and went, and the submarine had never returned. A frantic search was conducted with 20 vessels and aircrafts trying to locate the Minerve, but it was eventually called off on February 2nd when they found nothing. The K-129 with a crew of 98 descended on March 8, 1968, and almost 2 weeks into patrol on the North Pacific, the K-129 failed to send a scheduled radio message. The Soviets soon began a frantic search, and after 2 months of no sign of the submarine, they gave up their search. The cause of the ship sinking remains unknown and will likely never be known. Almost 3 months after the K-129, the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered attack submarine with a crew of 99 men, went missing in the Atlantic while on its way back from a patrol in the Mediterranean. It was sent out on February 15, 1968, and toward the end of its patrol, it radioed that it was expected to return on May 27th. But as you can guess, the USS Scorpion would never return. Like the others, many searched for the lost ship, but on June 5th, the Scorpion and its crew were declared presumed lost. Over the years, there have been multiple searches for these submarines, but only parts have been recovered, and it's considered one of the biggest mysteries that happened in the sea. No one knows why so many went missing in such a short amount of time, how exactly they went missing for so long, and what exactly made these vessels disappear. And this is a mystery we may never get the answer to. Coming in at number 3 we have the Bermuda Triangle. Named for the triangular shape of around 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda and Puerto Rico, for centuries the Bermuda Triangle has been mystified as a harrowing patch of ocean where sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the natural world and disappear forever. Back when Christopher Columbus first sailed the area, he claimed to see a giant ball of light in the sky that crashed into the horizon and made it glow. Soon after, all sorts of strange events happened in the area, including several boats mysteriously disappearing, and in one incident in 1945, an entire squadron of US torpedo bombers vanished into thin air air due to all these weird instances, giving this place the name the Devil's Triangle. The exact number of ships and airplanes that have disappeared is not known, but it's estimated that around 50 ships and 20 planes have been victim to the Bermuda Triangle, and many of these mysterious disappearances of these ships and planes have never been recovered. Many see the Bermuda Triangle as a real phenomenon and have multiple theories to try and explain this mysterious place, and some of these theories are human error, paranormal explanations, violent weather like hurricanes, the Gulf Stream, which is a major surface current within the ocean, methane hydrates, which is a form of natural gas that causes bubbles to form around the ship and ultimately sink it without warning. All of these are only theories, and the Bermuda Triangle to this day is the most notorious sea legend of all time.
Swinging in at number 3, the Ridgeway Hill Viking Burial Pit. And this one is so heavy metal that I have no idea. It could literally make up the plot of a Clive Barker film. In September 2008, archaeologists from Oxford Archaeology began excavating along the route of the A354 when they discovered a burial pit on nearby Ridgeway Hill containing the bodies of what appeared to be 54 Viking mercenaries. And all of them were decapitated. Not only were they all decapitated though, but when their remains were discovered, it was found that they were all in relatively neat little piles. Their heads in one pile, their torsos in another, like some kind of ancient hunting grounds visitor attraction. Researchers are stumped about the Ridgeway Hill pit. There are no leading theories, and the vast majority of it just doesn't make sense. Carbon dating found that their remains dated back to between 970 and 1025 AD. And they were all of Scandinavian origin and carried the physiques of warriors. One leading theory is that the group was somehow ambushed by nearby villagers and ceremoniously slaughtered, but that makes zero sense and has no ties to the known ritualistic practices of the native Britons. Also, markings on the Vikings' bones show that the method of execution was a bizarre mix of crude and incredibly precise blows, and there was a total of 188 wounds visible on the skeletons, an average of 4 per Viking, one of which had the top of his skull sliced off, exposing his brain. Vampiric blood ritual, ancient cult sacrifice, I have no idea, but the Ridgeway Hill pit doesn't make any sense at all. Next up at number 2, Göbekli Tepe. And to be honest, I could talk about Göbekli Tepe all day, because what the hell is going down in that place we'll maybe never know. Göbekli Tepe, which is Turkish for Potbelly Hill, is an ancient megalithic site that was evidently used for social ritualistic practices. Oh, and also it dates back to the 10th millennium BC. At the least. Just look at this place and you'll understand exactly why this is so insanely baffling. During a time which most anthropologists agree we as humans were primitive hunter-gatherers. But nah, Göbekli Tepe seems to say otherwise, with the structure itself making up patterns of absolutely massive T-shaped stone pillars, more than 200 of them, which form around 20 separate circles and are currently the world's oldest known megaliths, older than Stonehenge. Do you know the kind of ingenuity it takes to build a structure like that? So during a time when mankind was seemingly roaming the plains hunting mammoths, we were actually building incomprehensibly vast structures. Klaus Schmidt, who was a leading German archaeologist, held the belief that Göbekli Tepe was a vastly important pilgrimage destination and a somewhat cathedral for a primitive cult of the dead. Though no tombs or graves have ever been found at the site, Schmidt believed that they remain to be discovered, hidden in niches located behind the temple walls. It's important to note that the vast majority of Göbekli Tepe is yet to be unearthed, and mainstream archaeology has primarily ignored this site. For all intents and purposes, it may be one of the most important ancient structures of our species. As Ian Hodder of Stanford University says, Göbekli Tepe changes everything. And finally, our number 1 spot, the Sphinx. And bear with me, because there is one ancient structure that is beyond baffling: the Sphinx and the perpetual mystery that surrounds it. Now, I'm a stickler for science, but there is something about the Great Sphinx of Giza that just doesn't add up. Now, hear me out, because the vast majority of Egyptologists claim that the Sphinx is 4,512 years old, which would have meant it was built in the year 2494 BC. But that completely ignores the fact that there are certain very clear weathering patterns on the Sphinx that do not occur in any other ancient structures in the area, the Great Pyramids included. Author John Anthony West, alongside geologist Robert M. Shoke, found very clear evidence of water erosion on the structure, which is not consistent of the environmental climate patterns of the given time. These patterns and the effect of water erosion would be consistent in a time when Egypt was a wet and rainy landscape, meaning that the Sphinx would have had to be between 7,000 and 10,000 years old. On another note, between 1991 and 1993, when West's team were examining the Sphinx, they found evidence of hollow, regularly shaped spaces and chambers between the pores and at either side of the structure. Egyptologists completely put an end to their examination and forbid any other work. The mysteries of the Sphinx are countless, and one thing is for certain: they're not being fully explored by modern research. Kicking off at number 5, Paulette Jaster. In May 1979, a 25-year-old woman, Paulette Jaster, had disappeared from a small town in Michigan where she lived with her mother and 6 siblings after being tormented by her own mental health issues. The family were distraught and searched endlessly for Paulette, but to no avail, left with no explanation as to her ultimate fate. They were left in the dark for nearly 35 years until Sharon Derrick, a forensic anthropologist, was examining old autopsy pictures of an unidentified woman whose body had been buried in a pauper's grave in Houston, Texas. Sometime in January of 2014, Sharon Derrick had received a tip from the internet, a web sleuth who had been scouring a database of unmarked graves and unidentified deaths, when they noticed similarities between the Paulette Jaster missing persons report. After pursuing the lead, Sharon managed to match photographic evidence of 3 distinct freckles on the Jane Doe's face to that of Paulette Jaster, which tragically revealed that she'd been killed in a hit-and-run incident on March 28, 1980. Sadly, Paulette's life had came to an end, but after 35 years, her family could finally grieve their missing daughter. Swinging in at number 4, Jalopnik. Here's an interesting one, and of all places, was solved by Jalopnik, which, come on, is a great word. Jalopnik, an automotive fan forum that has a massive user base of motor fanatics who had their moment to shine back in 2012 following a fatal hit-and-run incident in Waynesboro, Virginia. Tragically, 56-year-old Betty Marcel Wheeler was walking near her home when she was hit by a vehicle and killed. The vehicle had fled the scene, but police had found a part of the vehicle lying by the roadside. Unable to identify it, they posted it to Jalopnik, seeking the aid of car enthusiasts in the hope that it would lead to the prosecution of the perpetrators. And guess what? It did. Within minutes of the Waynesboro Police Department asking the internet for help, several users had already came forward and identified the part as belonging to a Ford F-150, which swiftly led to the arrest of 2 men, bringing justice to Betty Marcel Wheeler and her family. Next up at number 3, Grateful Doe. The unsolved mystery of Grateful Doe had perplexed the internet for years. In 1995, a 21-year-old man named Michael E. Hager and an unidentified hitchhiker were killed in a car accident in rural Virginia. Hager's family were devastated, but no one mourned for the John Doe hitchhiker, as the authorities were unsuccessful in identifying exactly who he was. The only thing to identify him was a tie-dyed Grateful Dead t-shirt, eventually giving him the nickname Grateful Doe. The case went cold. Almost 20 years later, a Redditor named Layla Betts from Queensland, Australia, stumbled upon the case of Grateful Doe, using a photographic reconstruction of his face from the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. Slowly, with the help of fellow internet sleuths, Layla began piecing together Grateful Doe's identity, which eventually led her to being contacted by a guy named Steve, claiming to be the former roommate of the unknown man. Turned out, he was right, and his real identity was Jason Callahan from Illinois, who had gone missing after following his favourite band, the Grateful Dead, on their nationwide tour. For over 20 years, Grateful Doe had remained unknown, but thanks to the hard-working curiosity of the internet, he was finally laid to rest.
In at number 2, we have the Gulf of Mexico's cursed shipwreck. An estimated 4,000 shipwrecks litter the seabed across the stretch of water, and the Gulf of Mexico is one of the wealthiest locations for maritime archaeology in the world. In February 2001, oil workers for ExxonMobil were laying some pipeline when they happened to stumble upon a shipwreck about 2,600 feet deep. After discovering the wreckage, a team was assembled to explore this mysterious ship, but nothing seemed to go right. The exploration submarine malfunctioned right as it was getting ready to go down to check out the wreck, and that was only the beginning of these mysterious mysterious malfunctions. Others include video monitors going out whenever they fired their thrusters, sonars breaking, and hydraulics going haywire with no explanation for any of these problems. After nothing working and things continuing to break, the Navy sent a researcher submarine down to investigate the wreckage, and on the way down it suddenly self-destructed, and somehow when it finally did get to the wreck, its arms were too short to reach anything. 6 months later, in July in 2002, a team working aboard the NR-1 decided to launch a robotic sub down to the wreck site, but the malfunctions continued. The second the rover entered the water, it veered to the right and went out of control. The tether had caught in the propellers, which caused the vessel to smash into the underside of the ship, and the rover was never recovered. Later in the summer of 2002, the curse would continue as a ship from Sustainable Sea Program of the NOAA offered to pick up artifacts from the site. The first time the vessel attempted to leave the dock, debris was lodged in the propeller. The second time, the propeller locked and the ship ended up in dry lock, needing repairs. Over the years, many others have tried to learn more about this wreck, but little was found, and what was found wasn't at all helpful. To this day, nothing has been able to get too close to the shipwreck to investigate and explore the phenomenon, and very little is known about this mysterious ship. Many believe the lives lost in the wreck continue to haunt the ship and will keep anyone and everything out of it at all costs. And finally, in at number 1, we have the unmapped ocean floor. This is truly one of the biggest mysteries, and humans' curiosity about the Earth's floor is centuries old. Much remains to be learned about the ocean, especially exploring the mystery of the deep sea. From mapping and describing the physical, biological, geological, chemical, and archaeological aspects of the ocean and understanding their dynamics. For centuries, scholars believed the deep sea to be a lifeless place. Until the late 19th century, we've discovered there is a diversity of life and creatures living down there. Many researchers and divers had tried to dive and take submarines down to explore more of this unknown place, but it's very hard due to the extremely cold temperatures, the darkness, and the literally bone-shattering pressure that's more than 1,000 times that at sea level. In 2019, a retired naval officer, Victor Vescovo, set a new record as one of the deepest dives to date, reaching almost 36,000 feet down in a submarine into the deepest place on Earth, the Marianas Trench. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, driving weather, regulating temperature, and ultimately supporting all life's organisms. Throughout history, the ocean has been a vital source of sustenance, transport, commerce, growth, and inspiration. But to this day, more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored, and it's still unknown how deep the ocean really is. Given the high degree of difficulty and cost in exploring our ocean using underwater vehicles, researchers have relied heavily on technologies such as sonar to generate maps of the seafloor, but currently less than 10% of the global ocean is mapped using modern sonar technology, and only about 35% of the United States have been mapped using modern methods. As we go deeper into the ocean floor, it's too deep for this modern technology because it's too remote and dark for this type of visual mapping. So if you go swimming in the ocean, it's very unknown of what is swimming and living below you. But scientists and researchers continue to develop technologies to unlock the many secrets of the ocean. The NOAA is working to increase our understanding of the ocean realm.
Kicking off at number 5, the Lost Roman Legion, a mystery that has baffled Roman historians for eons. The Legio IX Hispania, or the Ninth Legion, also commonly known as the Lost Legion, was one of the most renowned fighting forces of the Roman Empire that existed from the 1st century BC until at least 120 AD. They collected countless battles and victories across the empire's influence, participating in the Siege of Asculum in 90 BC, as well as fighting ferociously beside Mark Antony in the Battle of Actium. Following the assassination of Caesar, they were one of the Senate's most powerful military tools and battled the Cantabrians of Spain as well as the Germanic tribes of the Rhine borderlands. And after that, their successes led them to Britain, where they participated in the Roman invasion led by Emperor Claudius, and it is thought that they were stationed there all the way until 120 AD. And then they disappeared completely, seemingly fell off the face of the earth. Now, the Romans were incredibly diligent record keepers. It's why we know so much about them and why they made extensive records of every military battle and confrontation, even their losses, so they could better develop their imperial machine. And the Ninth Legion, after seemingly heading to Scotland to fight the Picts and Celtic tribes, just disappeared. No notes, no records, nothing. Now, the Lost Legion was made up of over 5,000 men, and somehow, in the strange mists of time, they all completely disappeared. I guess we'll never know. Coming in at number 4, the Sky Caves of Nepal. Also known as the Mustang Caves, the Sky Caves of Nepal are a collection of over 10,000 man-made caves dug deep into the sides of the Himalayan Valley in the Mustang district of Nepal. This place has absolutely baffled archaeologists and researchers since their discovery in the mid-90s, when local explorers began venturing inside the stacked caves and found several dozen partially mummified human bodies, all at least between 2,000 and 3,000 years old. Further exploration of these caves has led to discoveries of valuable Buddhist paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, and numerous ancient artifacts that is thought to belong to the 12th and 14th century. But the fact that the Sky Caves seem to predate them by over at the least 2,000 years has offered no answer to the burning question: who built these caves and why? Since 1996, the Sky Caves of Nepal have been listed as a UNESCO tentative site, and the Mustang region was formerly known as the Kingdom of Lo until its annexation by Nepal at the end of the 18th century. This in turn made it a restricted demilitarized area until 1992, making it one of the most preserved and isolated regions on the planet. Seemingly, whoever was making these caves have been there for at least 3,000 years, burying their dead in elaborate ritualistic ceremonial sky tombs, and no one has any idea why.
Number 2 on this list is dark energy. For a long time, the only force that was thought to be operating on the entire universe was gravity. This was everywhere in the universe and decided pretty much how things played out. Gravity is not alone anymore though, or at least since the discovery of dark energy. Dark energy is this invisible force that is everywhere in the universe and is partially responsible for speeding up the expansion of said universe. Apparently this energy overtook gravity 5 billion years ago as the dominant force that's expanding the universe, and that's why it's happening in the first place. The thing is, we have no idea what this dark energy is or why it's here. Similar to dark matter, it feels like this has just appeared, and because we can't see it or have no idea of its origin, we have no idea how much weight it really has on us and our current laws of physics. Apparently 2/3 of the energy mass of the universe is made up of this stuff, and we have no idea about it. That's kind of scary if you think about it, and it puts in perspective how little we know about things. Oftentimes, I think we fall into a trap assuming that our species is far more advanced than it actually is, but when you consider that we have no idea where 2/3 of the energy mass in our universe came from, or what it is, it really brings you back to reality. I feel like this might be one of the hardest mysteries on this list to solve, and it's gonna take a while. And number 1 on this list is the multiverse. What seems to be the staple of a plotline of any good sci-fi movie these days is the multiverse, something that we truly know nothing about. The theory is basically that there is an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities and outcomes, and it's all just freaking infinite and honestly kind of hurts my brain to think about for very long. But is there any substance to this theory? How will we be able to know if it's true or not, and what would that mean for us? So the multiverse theory all comes from another theory called inflation theory. Inflation theory is the thinking that in basically a second, when our universe was just a baby, everything started inflating and growing super fast, expanding outwards in all directions. Now it's thought that the inflation of our universe stopped 14 billion years ago, but that when our universe stopped, the beginning of another started, and so on and so forth. It's very complicated, and in all honesty, I don't really understand all of it, but that's the bare bones. There's also the thinking that because life is so hard to support, as in you need so many things to go right in the universe, it seems extremely unlikely that if there is only one universe, life would have actually formed. If there were multiple or infinite universes, there would be enough chances though that one or more are bound to have the necessary things to create life. Either way, if this is true, then it obviously changes a lot of things about how we view our universe and the role we play in it. Maybe there's another version of you just chilling in a totally alternate universe right now, except instead of hands you have wings or something. A little ridiculous, I know, but if universes are infinite, then you never know.
Kicking off at number 5, SETI. And this is an incredibly interesting case because if the implications are true, then it exists in 2 separate timelines. Both the early 20th century and, believe it or not, in late 1200 BC. Let me explain. On January 16, 1904, a girl by the name of Dorothy Eady was born in the London suburb of Blackheath to two Irish middle-class parents, Reuben Eady and Master Taylor, and her mother, Caroline Eady. At the age of 3, Dorothy suffered a terrible fall from a flight of stairs that by all rights should have killed her, but after she had recovered in hospital, in the years that followed, she started to exhibit strange behaviours. She suddenly had developed a keen interest in ancient Egypt and began talking in a strange, otherworldly accent. At Catholic school, she was thrown out for declaring her love for Osiris and her longing to return to what she referred to as the old religion. After being taken by her parents to the British Museum, she saw a photograph of the New Kingdom Temple and loudly declared, "This is my home, but where are all the trees? Where is the garden?" It turned out that the photograph was the temple of Seti I, the father of Ramses the Great. Dorothy became transfixed with the museum and would visit every day, claiming that she was back amongst her peoples. In her later life, she would become heavily involved in the study of Egyptology, where she moved to Cairo and changed her name to Seti. This is where it gets crazy, because she then claimed that over a 12-month period she was visited by an apparition known as Hor-Ra. In perfect hieroglyphics, she wrote a 70-page text dictating her former life as a priestess at the temple of Seti. And despite pretty much every attempt to trip her up, her story was terrifyingly accurate. So much so that the garden that she claimed existed as a child turned out actually did. She led archaeologists to a site in the temple ruins, and excavations uncovered a garden that perfectly matched her descriptions. Pretty spooky, right? Next up at number 4, the Antikythera mechanism. If you know anything about the legendary Antikythera mechanism, then you'll know that it's pretty much baffled scientists since its discovery way back in 1901. Now, it may look like some kind of weird piece of ancient metal, but the real kicker is that the Antikythera mechanism appears to be the first instance of an analog computer that, get this, potentially dates back to 200 BC. It was found amongst the wreckage retrieved off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera, and it is believed to have been designed and constructed by ancient Greek scientists. But what exactly were the ancient Greeks doing with a clockwork computer? Well, it appears that they may have been scanning the stars. The device itself is a series of complex clockwork mechanisms comprised of at least 30 meshing bronze gears. Now, detailed imaging of the mechanism suggests that it had 37 gear wheels that enabled it to follow the movements of the moon and sun throughout the zodiac, and could predict eclipses to pinpoint accuracy and even model the irregular orbit of our moon. What is absolutely crazy about the Antikythera mechanism is that the knowledge of this technology was evidently lost at some point in antiquity, and anything even remotely correlating to its design didn't appear again until the development of mechanical astronomical clocks in Europe in, get this, the 14th century. It is living proof that our ancient ancestors had a much more capable grasp on the mysteries of our existence than anyone has ever expected. If only the Library of Alexandria hadn't burned down, eh? Swinging in at number 3, the Amber Room. Now, as far as ancient mysteries go, this one is perhaps the most recent, although the design and creation of the mysterious Amber Room dates back to the early 17th century. Now, the precious gemstone of amber has enthralled Europeans for countless generations, and in particular the Russian aristocracy, so much so that in 1716 Peter the Great was gifted an entire room built out of the stuff to celebrate the peace between Russia and Prussia. It was originally installed at the Charlottenburg Palace, home of Frederick I, the first king of Prussia, and Peter the Great loved it so much that Friedrich was like, "You can have it, bud, we're friends now." The room consisted of 180 square feet of pure decadence, glowing with over 6 tons of amber, which were backed with panels upon panels of gold leaf. Today, historians estimate that the original Amber Room would have been worth over $142 million, and is often considered to be the 8th wonder of the world. So, where is it? Well, of course, in 1941, Adolf Hitler initiated Operation Barbarossa, and 3 million German soldiers ravaged their way into the Soviet Union. Inevitably, the Amber Room was seized, tore down by German troops, packed up into 27 crates, and shipped back to Germany, where it was on display at Königsberg Castle until 1943. But in the final months of that year, the end of the war was in sight, and the Amber Room was dismantled, ready to ship away in case the castle was destroyed by Allied forces. That's where the case goes cold and the trail of the Amber Room was lost to history. Some say that the Amber Room is still hidden within the ruins of the castle, others believe it to have been straight up destroyed in the bombings. There are those that claim it was loaded onto a ship and can be found somewhere at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The truth remains that we may never know, but it's one of history's most mysterious treasures.
In it, 2 Eilean Mor lighthouse keepers. Eilean Mor is a remote island located within the Flannan Islands. It is completely uninhabited, aside from one lighthouse that once housed a group of keepers whose unexplained disappearances left the world stunned. The island has always sparked interest in people due to the supernatural superstition surrounding it. The islands were named after Saint Flannan, a 6th century Irish bishop who built a small chapel on the island in hopes to deter the spirits he believed haunt the isolated spot. Now on the 26th of December 1900, a small vessel was making its way towards the Flannan Islands. Its destination, Eilean Mor. The vessel was carrying Captain James Harvey and a replacement lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore. As the vessel drew closer to the island, the pair were surprised to find that no one was there to greet them. They even sent up a warning flare to attract their attention. However, there was no response. As they made their way up to the lighthouse, they immediately noticed something was awry. The door was unlocked, coats missing, and chairs were overturned, as though someone had left in quite the hurry. The island was searched, but no one was ever found, except for a lighthouse log belonging to Thomas Marshall. The last entry was on December 12th. He wrote of severe winds, like a which had never been seen in 20 years. He also noted that one of the keepers had been very quiet and the other crying. What makes this log entry particularly peculiar is that there were never any reports of a storm hitting the island. In fact, the weather was calm. Eventually more clues were found. Ropes hewn over rocks which held a brown crate. Perhaps the keepers were attempting to retrieve supplies before a wave washed them all out to sea. I guess we'll never know. And finally, in at number 1, Elisa Lam. Arguably the most infamous unsolved mystery floating around on YouTube, many internet dwellers have attempted to solve this unexplainable death of a young Canadian girl at the Cecil Hotel, but none have been able to crack it, and I doubt they ever will. On February 19, 2013, the body of Elisa Lam was discovered atop the infamous hotel in downtown Los Angeles, floating in the building's water tank, completely naked. Prior to the grisly discovery, Lam had been reported missing at the beginning of the month, and her body was only located after tenants had reported issues with the water supply in the hotel. The root cause? Lam's deceased body floating within it. The discovery was truly horrifying, and the way in which her body was found has left more questions than answers. However, it's not the most disturbing thing that emerged out of this bizarre case. A CCTV video began to float around YouTube of Lam's final moments, which featured her in a frenzied state inside of the hotel elevator. In the disturbing video, Lam can be seen hitting a number of different buttons on the elevator panel, yet the door was never closed. Whether down to a malfunction or something more sinister, Lam's behavior is what sparks the most intrigue. She stands in the corner, almost hiding out of sight from whoever or whatever is on the other side of the doors. She then steps out before quickly stepping back in again, and then eventually leaves the elevator entirely. Now, many theorists on the internet have noted that a shadow that does not belong to Lam can be seen outside of the elevator doors. Personally, I haven't spotted anything, but that doesn't mean that she was completely alone. Now, back to the discovery of her body. Once retrieved from the water tank, it appeared to have decomposed and was bloated, showing hints of green and even marbling on the abdomen. However, there were no signs of foul play or suicide, which left medical professionals completely baffled. I don't think we'll ever know what truly happened to Elisa Lam, but what do you guys think?
And at number 5, the Beaumont children. Starting off our list is a mystery from Australia back in 1966. The disappearance of the Beaumont children is a mystery that has left people scratching their heads for decades now. 3 siblings aged 9, 7, and 4 years old disappeared from a beach in South Australia on Australia Day. According to witnesses, the last sighting of the children on the beach had been in the company of a tall, blonde, tan, athletic man with a thin face in his mid-30s. But the children and this suspect were never found, and bodies were never located. Since the beach was a short ways away from their home, their parents believed that the eldest sibling, Jane, would be capable of looking after her younger siblings, and the 3 of them would return home by noon as were instructed. This was a common occurrence for them, and because of the times back then, parents didn't worry about their children being harmed or abducted by strangers. When their father returned home from work at 3 p.m., the children were still not back, so he drove down to the beach, but was unable to locate them. Police quickly organized a search, with everyone hoping that the children had just simply lost track of time. Within 24 hours of the search, the missing children became known nationwide. The tall blonde man that the witnesses had described seeing the children with seemed odd to the parents, considering their children were often quite shy, and reports say that they were quite relaxed with him. It is suspected that perhaps the suspect had met with the children on the beach on multiple occasions, gaining their trust. There were a few other sightings too, with the children reportedly being sighted walking home alone around 3 p.m. To this day the case has yet to be solved, and in 2016 and 2018 there were leads that police explored, although it turned out that they were dead ends. This case is often credited with a shift in Australian lifestyles, with parents beginning to fear that their children were no longer safe when unsupervised in public. From missing children to serial killers, in at number 4 is Jack the Ripper. The Jack the Ripper case is perhaps the biggest unsolved serial killer case in the world, which over time has often found its way into contemporary horror stories and media and pop culture. In case you're not familiar with who Jack the Ripper is, back in 1888 in the London district of Whitechapel, a serial killer became known as Jack the Ripper terrorized the poverty-stricken area. His victims were typically women working as prostitutes, who had their throats cut prior to receiving abdominal mutilation, in which their internal organs were tampered with or removed. Because of this last bit of evidence, it was commonly believed that Jack the Ripper had some sort of knowledge or experience with the human anatomy and surgical practices. During the course of the killings, media outlets received letters allegedly from the killer, one of which referred to themselves as Jack the Ripper, which is where the name came from, despite the belief that most of these letters were a hoax, minus the infamous From Hell letter that came alongside half a preserved human kidney, reportedly taken from one of the victims. There are an unknown number of killings by Jack, although 5 specifically found between August 31st and November 9th of 1888 are considered to be canon killings, because the evidence linked them all. The murders were never solved, and to this day Jack the Ripper still captivates the public's interest. Up next at 3, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Back in 1959, a group of 10 young hikers went on a skiing expedition across the northern Urals of the then Soviet Union. Consisting mainly of students in their early 20s, 9 of them were later found dead, and the cause of their deaths have never been identified. Based on evidence found, the incident that caused their deaths occurred between February 1st and 2nd. Here's what we know thanks to diaries and camera footage. The group of 10 set out in the early hours of January 25th to a village that was the last inhabited settlement to the north of their destination. On the 28th, one of their members, the only survivor of the group, was suffering from health conditions pertaining to his heart, so he was forced to stay behind. The other 9 continued, and on the 31st they arrived at the edge of a highland area where they began to prepare to climb the nearby slopes. On the 1st, they had started to move across the pass with the intention of camping out on the other side, but the weather conditions worsened, with snowstorms and poor visibility becoming an issue. They chose to camp out on the slope, not wanting to lose the altitude that they had already gained. Prior to their departure, the group's leader had told their sports club that they would send a telegram upon their return, roughly around February 12th. The telegram never came. On February 20th, the rescue operation began, and on the 26th, the group's abandoned tent was discovered. According to one of the searchers, the tent was half torn down and covered in snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Footprints were found, implying that some were barefoot or in socks, and the prints led down to the nearby woods. This is where they found the first bodies, who were only dressed in their underwear. Other bodies were found nearby, and it appeared as if some of them had tried to climb a nearby tree in panic. It gets weirder too. According to the journalist reporting on the findings, 6 members of the group died from hypothermia, while 3 died of fatal injuries, including skull damage and chest fractures. The tent had been ripped from within. There were no indications of other people near the pass except for them. Based on the evidence, the group had left the campsite on their own accord, and the theory that the indigenous people who lived nearby may have attacked them was debunked, due to a doctor's report, which stated that the fatal injuries found on those 3 members could not have been from another human, stating, I quote, "because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged." The area is now known as the Dyatlov Pass, named after the leader of the expedition in memorial.
Next up at number 2, the fall of Angkor Wat. Now, the fall of the Khmer Empire, a highly advanced state-level society that proliferated in mainland Southeast Asia between the 9th and 15th centuries AD, has puzzled both archaeologists and historians for decades, culminating in the majestic ruins of its capital city, Angkor Wat. The Khmer Empire were incredibly advanced for their time and were noted for their enormous monumental architecture and their extensive trade partnership between India, China, and the rest of the world. They had a massive road system, evidence of advanced agricultural technology, and were most of all famous for their highly complex hydrological system that took advantage of the region's monsoonal complex, efficiently carving out a civilization in a tropical rainforest. Now, the traditional date for the empire's collapse is 1431, when Angkor Wat was sacked by the rival kingdom of Siam. But the reality of it is, no one really knows. Seemingly, while evidence suggests pockets of the empire remained, for the most part, they just disappeared. However, there may be an equally terrifying reason for their demise. Angkor Wat was constructed as a hydraulic city. It was a demonstration of ingenious technology that harnessed water and flow from the Siem Reap River in a highly advanced manner. But one of the leading theories of Angkor Wat's demise is suggestive evidence of a massive flood. Now, a flood of such stature doesn't seem to appear in any recorded annals of the time, but evidence of extensive water damage to the masonry is the only clue that historians have. Flash flood? Yeah, more than likely, but What caused it? That's anyone's guess. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Bimini Road. And talking of water, our final entry is completely submerged in the stuff, as in it lies at the bottom of the ocean bed just off the coast of the Bahamas. And what is it? Well, it's a road seemingly constructed from sub-rectangular limestone blocks that spans half a mile 18 feet below the water. Yeah, and what's it doing there? Well, you bet no one has a clue, as in really no one has any idea how it got there or even what it is, despite over 50 years of extensive research. The Bimini Road has been examined by geologists, archaeologists of all kind, anthropologists, marine engineers, pretty much anyone and everyone with any ancient underwater credibility, all of which have shrugged their shoulders at any reasonable explanation. Well, first off, how old is it? Again, no one knows, despite irregularities in carbon dating from various other materials from the area, which has split researchers into 2 camps. Proponents of the road being man-made and those that believe it is a natural geological occurrence. Now, usually geologists are pretty damn good at pinpointing the age of any given mineral, but not with the Bimini Road, as carbon datings have varied widely from being 1500, 3000 and 15,000 years old. Listen guys, there are so many potential consequences to the implications of the Bimini Road. It could just be nothing at all, a weird freak collection of rocks, but it also could be evidence of a larger settlement long lost to the deep blue sea, and the fact that numerous credible researchers from both camps can't come to an agreement is reason enough to give the Bimini Road some kind of thought. Well, I'll leave this one in your hands, horror fans.
In at 5, the Chase Family Vault. The first account of the Chase Family Vault incident was published in 1883 in James Edwards Alexander's Transatlantic Sketches. According to the writer, Mrs. Goddard was buried in the vault in 1807, followed by Anne-Marie Chase in 1808 and later Dorcas Chase in 1812. However, following the death of Thomas Chase, the vault was once again opened. But what was discovered baffled everyone. The caskets of the Chase girls were said to have been disturbed, having been tossed from the place, left in a very confused state. A similar incident was found to have occurred upon opening the vault for 2 burials in 1816 and 1819. It had been stated, I quote, "Each time that the vault was opened, the coffins were replaced in their proper situations, that is, 3 on the ground side by side and the others laid on them. The vault was regularly closed. The door, a massive stone which required 6 or 7 men to move, was cemented by masons, and though the floor was sand, there were no marks of footsteps or water. The last time the vault was opened was in 1819. Lord Combermere was then present, and the coffins were found confusedly thrown about the vault, some with their heads down and others up. What could have occasioned this phenomenon? In no other vault in the island has this ever occurred. Was it an earthquake which occasioned it, or the effects of an inundation in the vault?" End quote. What are your theories? Were the spirits of the Chase family not yet at peace, lingering within the sealed off vault, desperately seeking to escape? Or was something less sinister at play? An earthquake? A very strong jokester? No one will ever know. In at 4, Jeffrey Daniels. On November 10th, 1997, a man in his late 30s checked into a Super 8 motel in Aiken, South Carolina. He paid in cash but left no name, stating to the staff that he wanted to leave all that behind. That night he ordered food, but when it arrived he did not answer the door, and a do not disturb sign was seen hanging on his door with a handwritten note that read, "I am not responsible for the consequences." 3 days later his body was found. He had committed suicide. However, his method of death had never been released to the public, which has posed many questions. No identification was discovered at the scene, only 2 bottles of antidepressants. However, the labels were removed. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the mystery man had stayed at a number of local hospitals following a handful of failed suicide attempts. The only name he gave? Jeffrey Daniels. He supplied a social security number and a New York address, however both were fake. The mystery man's true identity was never discovered, or why he so desperately sought to remove his existence and leave behind all evidence of his life. In at 3, Kenny Veach. On November 10, 2014, a hiker by the name of Kenny Veach disappeared overnight in the mountains of Nevada, and since then, his disappearance has remained a complete mystery to the public and even those that knew him. Prior to his disappearance, Veach commented commented on a YouTube video, claiming to have found a cave in the area of Nellis Air Force Base. He wrote, "I am a long-distance hiker. One time during one of my hikes out by Nellis Air Force Base, I found a hidden cave. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M. I always enter every cave I find, but as I began to enter this particular cave, my whole body began to vibrate. The closer I got to the cave entrance, the worse the vibrating became. Suddenly I became very scared and hightailed it out of there. That was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me." Veach had stated that he would return to the cave, bringing with him a camera and a weapon, and that he did. He posted a video on YouTube showing the hiker looking inside. However, for those hoping to hunt it down themselves, it is almost near impossible considering the vastness of the desert. The events following the video are a complete mystery. All we know is that Veach returned 6 months later, but he was never seen or heard from again. We can only speculate. Was there something more supernatural occurring within the cave, causing the unexplained vibrations? Did he get lost upon his return? But considering his hiking experience, it is doubtful. Did he commit suicide? All we know is that a search party was conducted and his cell phone found near an abandoned mine shaft, yet no body, clothes, or other belongings were ever located.
Coming in at number 2, Abraham Shakespeare. Now, it sounds like great news winning the lottery, right? But you'd be surprised the lengths that people will go to when faced with the green-eyed monster, as is the case of Abraham Shakespeare, a 47-year-old Florida man that won $30 million on the lottery and would ultimately end up murdered and buried in a shallow grave. After collecting his winnings and paying off his family's mortgage, Abraham was approached by a woman named Doris D.D. Moore, claiming to be a financial advisor with the intention of helping Abraham manage his newfound wealth. Well, her real intention was to take the money for herself, and after months of lies and deceit, she shot Abraham twice and buried him under a cement slab. For months, local police suspected Moore as the killer but didn't have enough evidence to convict her. The case got backlogged for a while and was put under the scrutiny of the Web Sleuths Forum, a site dedicated to amateur e-detectives. Well, it gets crazier because during the Web Sleuths probe, Moore logged onto the forum anonymously, compelled to defend her reputation, but didn't take into account that crucial little thing known as an IP address. Web Sleuths co-owner Trisha Griffin called Moore's bluff and submitted the IP data to the police, which ultimately led to her conviction, where she was sentenced to life in prison. Don't browse the forum like that. No. And finally, our number 1 spot, the skull in the bucket. And this is a bit of a roller coaster to say the least, but the perfect example of what one determined internet detective can pull off with enough time on their hands. Back in 2001, a retired trucker named Roland Telfer noticed something weird at Missouri truck stop, an abandoned plastic bucket filled with concrete. Thinking to use it to feed his pigs back home, he dumped the concrete on his farm, but it wasn't until months later, when the concrete had crumbled away, that he realized what it really was. A human head. Eventually, it turned out that it was the head of Gregory May, a 56-year-old tattoo artist.
Number 5 on this list is the Fermi paradox. This one is all about aliens, but maybe not how you might expect. Science Focus says, in 1950, Enrico Fermi, the man who built the first nuclear reactor, was having lunch in the canteen of the Los Alamos Bomb Lab in New Mexico when he suddenly said, "Where is everybody?" Everyone around the table knew exactly what he meant. Decades later, Fermi's question was examined independently by the American physicists Michael Hart and Frank Tipler. Hart considered aliens spreading throughout our Milky Way, and Tipler considered self-replicating machines that, on arrival at a planetary system, exploit the resources to build 2 copies of themselves that continue voyaging. Both concluded that even at modest speeds of travel, every star in the galaxy would be visited in a fraction of the age of the Milky Way. As Fermi realized, the aliens should be here on Earth. They do not appear to be, though. This became the Fermi paradox. Hundreds of explanations have been proposed. They include the ideas that we are the first intelligence to arise in the galaxy and so are totally alone, and that we are a nursery world off limits to advanced civilizations that might adversely affect our development. A more mundane possibility is that there is no paradox because any signs of visitation in the distant past would be erased by wind, rain, and geological processes. Recently, however, a team led by Dr. Jonathan Carroll Nellenbach of the University of Rochester, New York, has proposed that our sun may simply have been bypassed by a wave of extraterrestrial expansion. So why are aliens not here? Have they already been here and we didn't even know? Or did they just bypass our solar system altogether? Or is all of this nonsense and the universe is just so big that they haven't gotten to us yet? It's certainly something interesting to think about. Considering the universe is infinite and there are so many places and planets we don't know about, it seems ridiculous to think that we're the only intelligent life or the first intelligent life in everything. Like, that's as if we hit the biggest lottery ever. Comment down below what you think about this alien question and why aren't they here yet? Number 4 on this list is dark matter. You've definitely heard the term dark matter get thrown around a bunch before, and you've probably wondered, what the heck is it? Well, if that sounds like you, then you aren't alone. Scientists all across the globe are still wondering what dark matter is and the purpose that it serves. Science Focus says dark matter gives out no light or too little light for us to detect. We know it exists because we see the effect of its gravity on the visible stars and galaxies. For instance, the Milky Way could not have dragged in enough matter to make its stars in the 13.82 billion years since the Big Bang without there being a lot of invisible matter whose extra gravity speeded things up. The European Space Agency's Planck satellite found that dark matter accounts for 26.8% of the mass energy of the universe compared with the 4.3% of normal atomic energy. It therefore outweighs the visible stars and galaxies by a factor of 6. Puzzlingly, no Earth-based experiment has found any evidence of dark matter despite decades of searching. It is conceivable that it's not our theory of matter that needs modification, but our theory of gravity. Or that dark matter is not a fluid made of a single particle, but is complex like the atomic matter we see around us. Maybe the universe is filled with dark stars and dark planets and dark life. There is an entire universe of dark matter that we don't even know about. Like, what the heck is this stuff and what's it composed of? Why can't our eyes see it? Why doesn't something this dense even show up? It's all very confusing and nobody can figure it out right now. Dark matter is one of the biggest mysteries in the universe, and understanding what it is and how it works could completely change our understanding of gravity and matter as a whole. Hopefully NASA can get a grasp on it soon and the mystery can finally be solved. Number 3 on this list is the central black hole. At the center of almost every single known galaxy in the universe, which there are about 2 trillion of, there is a huge black hole just chilling in the middle. These aren't your everyday typical black holes though, they are gargantuan in size and weight. Some of these beasts weigh around 50 billion times that of our sun. Just an absolutely insane number that our brains truly can't really comprehend. But how did this absolute unit of a black hole get there, and why is it so big? Well, NASA doesn't really know, and they are desperately trying to find out. Black holes are one of the most interesting things in our universe, and one of the things that we know very little about. The question of where does a black hole actually go to will probably never be answered because we'll never be able to go inside without getting completely crushed into oblivion. But figuring out why they're in the middle of pretty much every notable galaxy is important. If we can understand this, then we can understand how a galaxy is formed and potentially the lifespan of certain galaxies. Also, knowing what creates these black holes will help us better understand them and see if our planet will ever be at risk of such a disaster. Granted, maybe ignorance is bliss in this case, because even if we knew a black hole was coming, there's really nothing that we'd be able to do about it.
Number 2, the death fields. There is a stretch of I-45 highway between Houston and Galveston that is notorious to locals due to the string of violent, horrific crimes that have all occurred there since the 1970s. Since the first body was discovered, it's been thought that anywhere from 33 bodies have been discovered there, and the truly horrifying thing is how little police and authorities seem to have on this case. Initially, detectives believed that this work was that of a serial killer, due to the sheer number of bodies being found in the area, but over time some have wondered if it could be multiple criminals. Most of the victims have been young women, typically around college ages. The FBI has said that the agency's behavioral experts have created a profile of a possible killer. But there are no known witnesses to any of the crimes and no common person to connect them all. An official statement that was given by the FBI said that the signs point to one killer, although multiple killers can't be ruled out. Given the nature of the area where the bodies were found, it was likely someone with roots in the area, someone who would have known these fields were a good place to hide a body. In 1998, a man named Edward Howard Bell was arrested and claimed to have been involved in the deaths of 11 girls in Galveston County. And although he was a suspect in the aforementioned I-45 case, police unfortunately didn't have enough evidence to tie him to those larger crimes. Only one death on the I-45 was ever convicted, when Louisiana police arrested Kevin Edison Smith in 2009 on a completely unrelated charge. A DNA test found that it matched the body of a girl who had disappeared from Texas in 1996 and whose body was tragically found on the I-45. From this confession and conviction from two different criminals, it's suspected that multiple people were involved in these grisly crimes. Hopefully one day this case can be closed for good and the I-45 can go back to just being a highway. And number 1, the Servant Girl Annihilator. Perhaps one of the most infamous criminals to ever live in Austin, and to this day is still anonymous and possibly will forever. The Servant Girl Annihilator, absolutely brutally named, I cannot believe they called him that, was a serial killer who preyed on young women in Austin between 1884 and 85. He is thought by some to be America's first serial killer, hardly a badge of honor if you ask me. He attacked wantonly, and despite his name, he was not exclusively targeting women. He fatally attacked 7 women, 1 man, and additionally seriously injured 6 women and 2 men. All of his victims he would attack indoors while asleep and then would finish the job outside, leaving them to be found. His victims were all posed in similar manners and were all found with a sharp object inserted into their ears. Texan lawman started a manhunt for the criminal, arresting 400 men in the year of 85 in a desperate attempt for any leads on who was terrorizing the community. Interestingly, the top theory of elected officials at the time is that the Servant Girl Annihilator couldn't possibly have been committing all of these crimes by himself as one lone deranged criminal, but rather an identity shared by a group of men carrying out heinous acts all together. Now, in the end, no one was ever successfully accused of being the Servant Girl Annihilator. And what happened to him was additional police patrols and civilian militias around Austin ended up scaring the Annihilator off. Or so you think. A theory, although an outlandish one, is that the Servant Girl Annihilator would move to London to continue his crimes, as 3 years later, the Whitechapel killings would start and Jack the Ripper would terrorize the streets of London, leading to some people suspecting that maybe these two lunatics were connected in a way. Think about that, a globe-trotting serial killer wasn't content with just one, had to move, get 2 different scary nicknames. Imagine if both your nicknames were Servant Girl Annihilator and Jack the Ripper. A little much for one guy, if you ask me.
Coming in at 5, the Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste was an American merchant brigantine which was discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean off the Azores Islands on December 5th, 1872. Yep, this is already setting up to be the perfect case for our friends Ed and Lorraine Warren, if they had been alive in the 1800s, that is. But alas, can't win them all. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste took off from New York for Italy with 10 people aboard. However, nearly a month later, it was discovered by a British ship off the coast of Portugal. Save for a few feet of water, the ship was undamaged and still contained 6 months worth of food and water. The last entry in her log was dated 10 days prior. Her cargo was intact, and the captain and crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. None of those who had been on board were seen or heard from again. Creepy stuff, right? So what exactly went down? Well, nobody knows, or we have a theory. Some believe foul play, although the evidence in Gibraltar failed to support theories of murder and conspiracy. The suspicion of foul play lingered on. Insurance fraud was briefly suspected on the grounds of newspaper reports that Mary Celeste had been heavily overinsured. However, let's talk about the lifeboat. There was one lifeboat aboard the ship, which was never discovered. Now, one theory suggests that the transfer of personnel to the yawl may have been intended as a temporary safety measure. More speculation suggests that the state of the rigging and ropes that the ship's main halyard may have been used to attach the yawl to the ship, enabling the company to return on board when the danger had passed. If the line had parted, however, Mary Celeste would have sailed away empty, leaving the yawl to founder with its occupants. As of today, the fate of the Mary Celeste remains largely a mystery. Pirates would have left the ship in a worse state than how it was found, and mutiny seems unlikely. My money is definitely on sea monsters or angry ghosts ghosts haunting the seas. If only Ed and Lorraine were around to give us the answers. Coming in at number 4, the toxic woman. Around 8:15 p.m. on February 19th, 1994, paramedics wheeled a young woman into the emergency room of General Hospital in the Southern California city of Riverside. The woman was awake but responded to questions with only brief and incoherent questions. The woman was Gloria Ramirez, who was just 31 years old and had cervical cancer. Her blood pressure was extremely low and her heart rate was incredibly fast. Now this is where things get weird. Like really weird. Doctors noticed an oily sheen on her skin and her mouth had a strange garlicky smell. When nurses went to draw her blood, they found that the sample smelled like ammonia, while others noticed her blood contained whitish particles. Not long after, the medical staff began to feel sick and faint, and by the end of the night, 23 workers were affected, with 5 even being hospitalized. After 45 minutes, Ramirez passed away from kidney failure. The incident would throw Riverside General Hospital into newspaper headlines for weeks, with the frightening possibility of toxic fumes capturing the public's attention. After years of forensic testing, explanation after explanation has been ruled out. No one will ever know what happened to Ramirez, though it was likely toxic. Other theorists are calling for something else, something paranormal, something that only Ed and Lorraine Warren could figure out. Coming in at number 3, Overton Bridge. Overton Bridge is a Category B listed structure over the Overton Burn on the approach road to Overton House in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. It was completed in 1895 and designed by the landscape architect H.E. Milner. Though scenic and incredibly beautiful, this bridge has a haunting and unexplained mystery surrounding it. According to Glasgow skeptics, a tale of dogs leaping from the bridge to their deaths has been on the internet since 2005, when it was mentioned in passing on a forum about hidden sites in Glasgow. However, it was when the Daily Mail published an article about it that things began to take off. Now known as the Bridge of Death, at least 50 dogs since the 1960s have thrown themselves to their death in the gorge below. The canine deaths have prompted claims of paranormal activity at the bridge, with paranormal investigator Brian Dunning asking, is it possible for a dog to commit premeditated suicide? Yes. In 2019, the owners of the Overton House were interviewed for the New York Times, in which they said that in the 17 years that they lived there, they had seen a number of dogs which had become agitated, jump and fall from the bridge. Spooky stuff. However, it's not just the curse of the dogs that plagued the bridge. In October 1994, a man threw his 2-week-old son to his death from the bridge because he believed that his son was an incarnation of the devil. So sweet. Father of the Year. He then attempted to commit suicide several times, first by attempting to jump off the bridge, and then later by cutting his wrists. Honestly, the paranormal events surrounding this bridge will never be solved, but I would have loved for Ed and Lorraine to visit the site and try to reach out to the It's like a joke. It's a joke. But I would have loved for Ed and Lorraine to visit the site and try to reach out to the demonic forces surrounding it. One day. Their ghosts will come back. In at 2, the Atlas Vampire. The Atlas Vampire was an unknown assailant who committed the unsolved vampire murder in Stockholm, Sweden in 1932. Yep, you heard me correctly. A vampire. In 1932. On May 4th, 1932, a 32-year-old sex worker, Lily Lindstrom, was found murdered in her apartment in the Atlas area of Stockholm. She had supposedly been dead for 2 to 3 days before the police broke into her apartment. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and was discovered completely naked and face down on her bed. Now, what makes this case noteworthy is what was missing from the scene: blood. All of her blood. Considering the cause of death and trauma, aka blunt trauma to the head, nearly all of Lindstrom's blood had been drained from her body, and police found traces of saliva on her face and neck. However, what makes this even stranger is that police found a blood-stained ladle in her apartment, something that they believe was used to drain, even drink, her blood. It's beginning to sound like a vampire now, right? Well, it did to the press, who nicknamed the unknown assailant the Atlas Vampire. And to this day, the murderer has never been apprehended. Now, what I want to know is if this vampire is still lurking around, ladle in hand. If so, I wish Ed and Lorraine were around to deal with this vamp. can't, it's like a joke. It's a joke, this video. And finally coming in at number 1, the Pollock twins. The strange story of the Pollock twins begins in the quaint town of Hexham in Northumberland, England, with the family of John and Florence Pollock and their 2 young daughters Joanne and Jacqueline. Things couldn't be better for the family until their idyllic life was met with tragedy on May 7th, 1957. When the 2 Pollock children were on their way to church with a friend, they were hit by a car driven by a local woman who had taken an overdose in a bid to kill herself. The 2 children were killed instantly. 2 years later though, their mother gave birth to twins, Gillian and Jennifer, identical twins in every way, aside from Jennifer's birthmarks that resembled similar marks on her deceased sister Jacqueline. After the twins were born, the family moved away to a different part of the country. This is where things begin to get weird. Gillian and Jennifer started asking for toys favoured by their dead sisters. And when the family moved back to Hexham, the twins supposedly recognised landmarks they had never seen before. These odd occurrences were enough evidence for Dr. Ian Stevenson to write about the twins in a book about reincarnation, claiming they were reincarnations of their older sisters. Now it is worth noting that Stevenson himself considered the possibility that the twins were perhaps influenced by what their parents had said in the past, but he eventually came to the conclusion that it would have been impossible for them to mould their behaviours and recollections to match the dead twins. It is unknown what is going on with the case of the Pollock twins or what it means for the reincarnation as a whole. At the end of the day though, it's an unexplained phenomenon that only Ed and Lorraine could have solved.
Number 5. The Ghost Bride of Galvez. To Texans, it's no secret that Hotel Galvez is haunted. The Grand Galvez, as it's known now, first opened its doors in 1911 and since then has been said to be home to all manner of haunting, but the most retold story is that of Audra, the Ghost Bride of Galvez. Audra was a 25-year-old bride-to-be getting married there. Her betrothed was a young sailor who would frequently leave her on her lonesome while he was out on a voyage. During the periods where the sea would separate the 2 lovers, Audra would rent out room 501, climb out the ladder to the rooftop, and wait on the rooftop turret with love in her heart for her sweetheart to return. Now one day during a catastrophic storm, Audra was told that her fiance's ship capsized, and overcome with grief, Audra took her own life on the roof of the hotel. Tragically, as if this wasn't sad enough, her groom would arrive a few days later, eager to surprise and re-encounter his bride as he'd survived the capsizing. And although he was never able to be with her physically again, if you believe the stories, she might still linger around the premises. Visitors claim that Audra frequents the 5th floor, and in particular, her spirit tends to hang around the matrimonial suite and room 501. Some claim they hear random doors slamming, or strong currents of chills, flickering lights, the usual who's who of a ghost haunting a hotel. Other stories tell of seeing a candle lit on the rooftop, wondering if it's the ghost of Audra still waiting for her beloved to come back to her. The attendants at the Galvez claim that there's difficulties making electronic keys for room 501 since they're prone to malfunction frequently. Visitors to the Galvez go out specifically looking for Audra now, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spirit. If you ever go to Texas, be sure to check it out if you're brave enough. And if you're looking for more freaky stories, true crime, ghosts, cryptids, basically the whole 9 yards, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click on that bell and click on through and subscribe and find something to scream at. But do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more mysteries in Texas coming up. Number 4. The Icebox Killer. The Icebox Killer refers to an incredibly grisly crime that haunted Houston, and if you believe the conspiracies, might be entangled in a much larger web of interest. Take a listen to this brutal crime. On June 23, 1965, 2 Houston police officers were sent for a fairly benign wellness check and went to investigate the home of a suburban family, the Rogers, Fred and Edwina, and their son Charles. Edwina's nephew was concerned because he hadn't seen or heard from his aunt in a concerning amount of time. The 2 officers went to check the house and got no response from a knock. A look around in the backyard, they found a makeshift barricade on the back door, which was more than a little suspicious, so they entered the house. One of the 2 detectives opened the fridge instinctively and saw a pile of raw meat in the fridge. The detective dismissed it as boar or pig, and you can probably see where this is going. They opened the vegetable crisper and were disgusted at what they found: the heads of Edwina and Fred Rogers. Police suspected initially that the son Charles had been behind it, but why, no one was particularly sure. Now, here's where this already upsetting strange case gets wild. There are allegations that Charles Rogers was present the day of the JFK assassination, and some allege he was one of the 3 tramps photographed with police escort by Dealey Plaza. The conspiracy alleges that Charles Rogers, who was a former Marine and served in the Office of Naval Intelligence, was involved somehow in the larger assassination plot, and the claim is that somehow his parents discovered his involvement with the conspiracy and he had to silence them and flee. A bold claim, but Charles Rogers was never found. No proof of a body, despite being declared dead. Now, did he vanish? Or was he himself silenced to tie up a loose knot as part of something infinitely larger than himself? We may never truly have the answers for this one. Number 3. UFO sighting. In December 29, 1980, Betty Cash saw something on the outskirts of Houston near Dayton that would change the course of her life forever, as she made a close encounter of the third kind. She was driving her friend Vicki Landrum and Landrum's grandson home one night at 9 p.m. when the 3 of them noticed a bright light in the sky. Betty Cash described it like this: "We didn't know what it was, but we knew there was something that was lighting up the sky. We all began to feel heat, and all of a sudden Vicki screamed for me to stop. When I stopped, I went forward and her handprint was embedded in the dash of the car, and I thought, well, I've got to see what this is. So I got out, I walked towards the front of the car, and I stood there looking up, trying to figure out what this object was. Then a diamond-shaped object appeared with flames shooting out. The heat was tremendous. When I reached for the door handle, the door was so hot I couldn't even begin to open it. The only thing I was thinking was, are we gonna get out of here alive? And then seemingly as soon as it appeared, it disappeared, and Landrum stated that moments later, a large squadron of black helicopters soared over the area. After the choppers cleared, Betty took the Landrums home and retired for the night. The next morning, however, Cash said she was extremely sick, suffering from nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, and an intense burning in her eyes. Now here's where things get curious. Landrum and her grandson all reported the exact same symptoms. Over the next few days, Cash said her symptoms worsened so much, with large blisters forming on her skin, she eventually had to be taken to a hospital where she was treated for radiation poisoning, and she lost large patches of skin and clumps of hair. To date, there has never been a conclusive answer to what happened to Cash and Landrum. The US government denied any involvement and said they don't have any diamond-shaped crafts like that in their fleet, and it wasn't from their government. Was the military testing new technology on unsuspecting victims? Was it a craft from another world touching down for a moment? There are so few answers and so many questions for this unsolved mystery.
In at number 2, Roanoke. The name Roanoke might ring a bell to some horror fans out there. The Roanoke Colony, also known as the Lost Colony, was the basis for a season of the hit TV show American Horror Story. The actual colony, though, was an English settlement established in 1585 on Roanoke Island, which today is Dare County in North Carolina. When the colony was first established, they ran into issues due to a lack of supplies and bad relations with local tribes of Native Americans, one of which was the nearby Croatoan tribe on the Haratas Island. Many of the individuals from the colony left to return back to England a year afterwards because of this, but a small group of people was left behind. By the time a second expedition, led by the colony's governor, arrived to Roanoke in 1587, all of that small detachment had completely disappeared. Shortly afterwards that year, the governor left to return to England to ask the government for assistance, and eventually returned back in August of 1590, only to discover that the entire colony was now missing. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a tree. It's commonly believed that the settlers were killed off by the Croatoan tribe, but no bodies were ever discovered. Another theory is due to bad weather conditions, the settlers were forced to take shelter with local tribes, but no conclusive evidence can support that theory either. So where did they go? What happened to the 90 men, 11 women, and 11 children that were settlers there? Well, we may never know, but it's probably not what American Horror Story thought happened. And finally, in at number 1, Elisa Lam. The mystery of Elisa Lam is one that just doesn't add up. It's also an incredibly recent case, occurring in 2013. Elisa Lam, a student at the University of British Columbia, was discovered inside of a water tank located above the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA. She had been reported to be missing at the beginning of that month, and had only been discovered when maintenance workers at the hotel opened up the tank, after hotel guests complained about problems with the water supply. It gets weirder too. Footage of Elisa inside the hotel's elevator revealed strange behavior from the student. Whenever the elevator doors would open, she would look outside of them, and kept herself tucked into one of the elevator's corners, as if she was hiding. She was also known to have bipolar disorder, and the security camera also revealed that the elevator appeared to be suffering from malfunctions. Elisa leaving the elevator is the last known sighting of her. There was no evidence found concerning how exactly she got inside the water tank either. Doors to the roof of the building were locked, with only staff having the passcodes and keys, and no alarm was ever triggered, although it was noted that the roof was also accessible by the fire escape. It's also questionable how she would have gone inside the water tank on her own, since the lids are quite heavy and required a ladder to access. There was also no trace of her on the roof afterwards, and she was found naked inside the tank with most of her clothes and other personal effects floating in the water beside her. Now, the most common theory is that she was being pursued by someone, or believed that she was being pursued by someone, and had tried to hide in the water tank to escape them, but got trapped within. Some have noted that the mystery of her death shares similarities with the 2005 horror film Dark Water, and the film that it was a remake of, the 1996 Japanese movie of the same name.